This week, the biggest transit is the winter solstice on Saturday, December 21st. It is the longest night of the year for us in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's actually the longest day of the year for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere. But I'm going to focus a little more on the Northern Hemisphere because that's where I am. That's where most of our listeners are. And talk about this movement into the darkness that we've been going through. Longer nights, shorter days. If you live further away from the equator, more north, then you really feel this. I grew up in Minnesota, so we'd have very short days around this time of year, and sometimes I wouldn't see the sun for a few days. So you may be feeling that if you're up there, and I have a lot of compassion for that and empathy for that experience. But there's an internal part of this, there's an inner part of this that we're all going through when we move towards the winter solstice. And for those of you in the southern hemisphere, this just happens in the next 6 months instead of the last 6 months. But over the last 6 months, you may have been finding yourself going deeper within into some deeper realizations. Not everybody has this experience. Not everybody cares about astrology or intuitive stuff or interesting spiritual stuff. So they don't do this inner work. But if you're listening to my voice right now, you're probably into this kind of inner work, working with the subconscious, the shadow, your intuition, trying to better understand yourself, trying to make sense of the world and reality. And I am too. I am right there with you. I don't have all the answers. I don't think I'm perfect by any means. And I'm going through my own deep realizations and inner work through this cycle myself. So in today's episode, I just want to share a little bit about that and bring in more of the human side of the podcast. I think that's what I resonate the most with when I listen to teachers I follow and the teachers I've worked with over the years, because the astrology part is just a little piece of the puzzle, right? I can tell you, on Saturday, December 21st, the winter solstice is happening, talk about what that means. But what does it really feel like? What are we really experiencing here? And maybe you can resonate with my experience. Maybe you want to share a bit of your experience with me in the comments on Spotify, or send me a message on quietmindastrology.com. You reach out. And those of you in the Vedic astrology mentorship community, we have space to share about these kind of things too. But as we go towards the end of the year, you're probably also feeling a bit reflective, a bit introspective, looking back at the year. So it tends to be a very busy time of year. So there's a lot of noise and chaos to distract from that. But energetically, with nature and Ayurvedically, it really is an ideal time in the Northern Hemisphere to be going within. Like the bears go to hibernate and the trees cut off all their leaves so they can survive through the winter. I think there's a part of us as humans that need to go through this cycle, even if we're not so close to the colder, darker days. Like me, I moved to Mexico for the sun mainly, to have longer days, to have less of this intense cold Minnesota weather. So regardless of where you are, it's you're still probably feeling this to some degree in the northern hemisphere, this movement towards the darkness, towards moving within. And how do you do that work? What is that work? How do you really do that? I have a friend who's kind of struggling with some things like this, wanting to get there. And I have a men's group I'm part of. This helps with this. I've been in and out of therapy many times over the years, counseling, just to have that support system that helps a lot with this. Doing yoga and meditative practices helps a lot with this. Knowing astrology helps a lot with this. But all these things are just helping. Right? Ultimately, there is a level of deep vulnerability and sort of surrender, uh, to just let life have its way with us in some ways, of like, we're not really in control. We try to understand it, we try to make sense of it, but we end up repeating patterns. We end up in situations where we don't know what to do. We end up uncovering patterns and then repeating the patterns. And maybe it's, why is this happening? How did I get here? And for me, one of those is in relationships, and I'm continually a student and just continually humbled by the lessons of relationships in my life, and finding myself repeating patterns that I thought were complete and cycles that I thought I closed, reopening. I could point to my astrology. I've got a lot of intense karma around relationships in my chart, and Venus being the uh, Atmakarika in my chart, which I've talked about before. That's something I've seen so many clients also have the same situation. Highest degree planet often brings you a lot of karma to work through, a lot of lessons. So Venus being an Atmakarika can be one of those reasons. And for me, it's like, what really works? Like, yeah, I know all these techniques, I know all these books, I know all these practices. But when it comes down to it, when you're actually in the thing, because I feel like I've really been in the thing for the last couple months, like repeating the lessons, learning the lessons, needing to relearn, needing to repeat it so I can learn the lesson, apparently. It's like sometimes those things just help, but they don't seem to really work in a way because there's a certain level of like just allowing life to move through that needs to happen. I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but it's like it doesn't matter how many techniques you know, how many practices you do, how much practices you have done. It's like what is present now needs to move through in this way. And it's not going to necessarily look like the way it looked before. And it's not going to necessarily work to just do the things that I've done before or you've done before. So it's this continual live relationship with life, like a dance. Like you go on a dance floor, it's like you got to just be present with what's there. You can't just memorize some perfect move and just repeat that move every time. There's certain dances, I guess, that can apply to. I'm thinking more like ecstatic dance, where you're just present. You're just moving, letting the music move you, being present and dancing with life. And I feel like that's what it's more like. And I suck at dancing. I don't like I don't like dancing that much. I get in my head so much, and it's so reflective of how I am with these kind of things. Like I go right to my head of like I want to understand it. I want to have the bigger picture. And maybe you air sign type people like me, like the Mercury dominant people like me can relate to this. You want to analyze things. I know a lot of Virgos are like this. You want to analyze things and understand them rather than feel and experience them. I know a lot of the water sign people out there, the feelers, want to just feel and they don't want to be told what to think and how to understand it and just need to express anger or sadness or whatever the thing is. And they're all valid. And all these ways of us experiencing life are totally valid. And that's another thing too is, going into stuff coming up, patterns repeating, lessons to be learned. I can listen to different teachers and hear their advice, but it's just their perspective. And this was something that's been so helpful to me with astrology over the years is like, if I'm listening to someone's advice and they say maybe like, you just got to exercise and get the energy out, or someone else says, you just got to talk about it and communicate. You look at that person's chart and it's like, of course, that's the way they solve problems, or of course, that's the way they process things. And everyone's a little different. So this is where knowing my chart is so valuable. It's like, okay, there's that pattern playing out. There's my pattern of how to respond to it. There's my pattern of how to try to process it. And everyone's way is valid. Somebody needs to just cry it out, or somebody just needs someone to listen to, or so to listen to them, or somebody who just needs to get their anger out and aggression in sports or something. It's all valid. And when you know the chart, it's like you know the blueprint of what's operating here, the operating system, you could say. And still, if we're not robots, we're not a construction site necessarily. Well, I guess we could say we are a continual work in progress. We're not a finished blueprint. It's always evolving. So knowing that astrology is good, but then the transits help know where things are evolving. The dashas help show you where things are evolving. And when you're going through like the Sati Sati or the Saturn return or a Dasha Sandhi or these more challenging transits, I'm in the Dasha Sandhi myself. It's like everything's a little uncertain and changing and like where's this gonna land? And I think I know and I got a good idea. And a lot of things are certain and clear. Like my work feels very clear for me. My purpose feels very good for me. I feel aligned with that, which I struggled with like 15 years ago. I was struggling with that a lot. But I feel like I'm on my path there. But yeah, certain things are aligned, certain things are clear, And then the things that are evolving can be seen in the transits, the sort of evolving dance. But still, it's like you gotta actually be on the dance floor. You gotta actually respond to how you wake up and what mood you're in and where your energy's at. How are you gonna respond to that? What are you gonna do with that? And we have these things we can come back to: astrology, yoga. For me, those are like the two big ones. Music has been huge for me over the years, of course, as well as a musician. And you know what they are for you. Like no one can really tell you what they are. No one can really tell you what to do. They can just give you their perspective from their worldview, their chart, their experience. But it's important to remember, like that whatever someone says, like this is how it's got to be. You got to think this way. You got to act this way. You look at their chart, and of course they would think that way. So it's more just what is your way, and it does help to find people with similar charts to you because they will think similarly, and oftentimes it's people you grew up with because they have all the outer planets are in about the same place, like in your grade in school. Especially if it happens to be someone has the same rising sign with you and was born within like 6 months of you, they probably have a lot of the same placements. So you might have a lot of resonance with them. But then it also helps to have people with opposite placements, like someone has the opposite rising sign, opposite moon. They give you really good perspective and they see things in a way that you might not see. So that's always helpful as well. But yeah, this little rant I'm on has no conclusion or no answers. Just wanting to share a little bit. And I know a lot of people going through a lot of stuff recently, and the Mercury retrograde brought up a lot of deep stuff. Mercury in Scorpio, and in the next year, in 2025, there's going to be a lot of water sign action. There's going to be a point where there's seven grahas in Pisces. All of the retrogrades, the Mercury retrogrades, are going to go through water signs. So there's going to be a lot of moving through emotional realms in 2025. Talk about this a lot at the Mindful New Year course if you want to go deeper with that. I'm getting amazing feedback on that. Lots of cool people joining in there and giving feedback. So lots of cool stuff in Mindful New Year and resources and the whole calendar for the year and everything to know all the transits and all the stuff to work with. But what I see in looking at that is yeah, a lot of emotional work. And we're in this march towards AI potentially just replacing all of our jobs. And what does it mean to be a human at that point? Why are we here? What are we doing? If your sense of purpose could now be outsourced to a robot. And we've gone through phases of this in human history and like not too long ago with outsourcing jobs to India and to China and so many people in the US in like the 90s, 2000s feeling dejected and lost and losing their job security and then trying to find their path in life. So we can look at that and see, well, people got back on their feet and found a new path, and the economy and the world moved on, and we can all adapt. But for me personally, as I'm seeing this, and I think if I have any gift, it's a pretty good sense of pattern recognition and using that as a predictive tool. So I can kind of see that, yeah, it is likely that AI is going to replace a lot of creative jobs and a lot of the repetitive, simple jobs, of course, but even the very creative jobs, even things like astrology potentially. So to me, it's like, well, then what is this really? And because, I could give you a book on what does it mean to have a Aries rising or Taurus rising. And now there's actually great AI tools. You can look this up. So uh, I know that's going to keep becoming more and more accessible and more simple and easy to use. So then what it can't replace, and even though it will get very good at it, it can't actually replace a flesh and blood human connecting with another flesh and blood human. And at least not in our lifetime, I don't think. So that's where it's like the heartbeat, the heart connection, the electromagnetic field that emanates from my heart and hopefully transmits through the wavelengths here that you're listening to on the podcast to your heart and then to the people around you and so on. That's what I want to bring more out in my astrology work. And a little less of my Virgo gifts of like analytical stuff, which is good too. But the intuitive stuff and the connection stuff and the heart stuff is what happens in a reading is like I'm feeling the energy of the person. I'm responding to the person on the other side and their life experience and their perspective and what's going on in their life. And yeah, yeah, I can't do that yet. Maybe 10 years, we'll see. It's growing so rapidly. But still, it's not a flesh and blood human and it never will be. And no matter whatever our jobs are, whatever our roles are, there's still a human to human element in it, in most jobs. And I think that's what's more and more valuable and more important, and what I want to share more, just more of myself. And hopefully it resonates. And hopefully I don't uh, turn you off and you want to listen to a robotic reading of the transits. You can get that many places now. But, what is it like to live through the transits? How does it feel as a human being to live through the transits? And as we go through this into the winter solstice, the last, this peak of the darkest night of the year, I hope you've had some time to go within to do some self reflection. I've been doing a lot of that in the last week myself, looking at what went really well in the last year, what didn't go so well, what lessons I could learn from it. This is a process I've been doing for now 15 years. And I share about it in Mindful New Year, and I guide you through the same process, a version of it that I've done. I find so valuable, and I did again this year. And taking the time to do that is like defragmenting your computer, which we used to have to do back like 20 years ago. You might remember this, defragging your computer. Windows PCs, you have to do this still, but Macs, you don't. But it kind of, there's all this fragmented memories and ideas and stuff scattered on your computer hard drive that it makes it slow down. And when you defragment it, now everything's like more orderly, more tidy, and more organized. And your computer can essentially think clearer. And I think that's what it's like for my mind. Maybe it's just because I'm a Virgo nerd, but I like this idea of getting current I talked about recently. So as we go into the new year, I just encourage you finding some time in the next week to get current. That might mean literally like cleaning out closets and drawers if you have time with the holidays, and emotionally like getting current with anything that's unresolved. And often that takes time in silence and stillness, and relationally getting current, having conversations you need to have if possible. I actually just was talking with a friend yesterday. You did a 10-day silent retreat. These are very common here where I live. It's almost, you could throw a stone, hit somebody who just got out of a 10-day silent retreat. And he was talking about how some old trauma came up that he thought was done and resolved. And I've had this kind of experience. You have old traumas come up that you think are done, old ruminating thoughts, songs. And why do I remember this song? Why did I put all that effort into memorizing the lyrics to Ice Ice Baby? Because now it's all I can think about for this hour of my meditation. That was one of my experiences. So, it's good to have time in silence and stillness where you get all the noise of the external to quiet down so you can hear the noise of the internal. And that's part of what I think this time of year is really meant to be about, but we pile on the holidays instead and we become more active and become professional consumers and just go out and buy the best deals. And especially in the US, I really, leaving the US, I really recognize that pattern of like, wow, I was a very good consumer. I was like part-time job, knowing how to buy the best of everything. And I think that's kind of conditioning in the Western world. We become part-time professional consumers. And then here where I live, it's like it's so minimal and there's no stores. Everything's so slow. It's just pain in the ass to try to be a professional consumer here. It's just more convenient to just go to the store when you need stuff and get it then, and it's just a few items. So, little tangent, but this is a good time of year to have that internal space to get quiet on the external, get more attuned to the internal if you can, and at least for a day, maybe at least for a little time, at least for an hour in the next couple weeks if you can. and reflect. Go within, listen within. And usually there's a really good guidance system in there. You probably have a relationship to it. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know what I'm talking about. And it's a lot clearer. I talk about this a lot as like a still, quiet voice. That's the true self, the Atman. It's a still, quiet, calm voice within. That's why I use this name Quiet Mind, because that's from the yoga tradition. Yoga is the quieting of the mind, the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. Because if you sit and meditate, you'll notice there's a lot of fluctuations in there. There's a lot of stuff going on. Vanilla Ice lyrics, old traumas, fears, anxieties. Did I eat too much? Did I not eat enough? Am I getting fat? Am I losing weight? All these things. Am I too old? Am I too young? That's the fluctuations of the mind. It's always going on. And then when you're around other people, you're picking up their stuff, especially in an intimate relationship. You're picking up their stuff. And for me personally, it's one of the things I'm learning recently is like how much of a sponge I really am and how loud it gets when I'm trying to be with other people and hold space for them. You know, I need better boundaries still. Like I thought I worked on these boundaries. I know how to set boundaries, but no, I still got work to do. As long as I'm alive, I've still got work to do. That's kind of my attitude. As long as we're alive, there's still work to do. So he's still working on the boundaries, but yeah, it's this thing of like we get quiet on the outside, we can hear what's happening on the inside. We can defragment the computer of the mind, of the heart, of the soul, and be a little more clear and have a little more space now to let in new stuff. Same thing on the computer. It's like, try to download stuff. No, your storage is full. You can't download anything else. You gotta defragment your computer and delete stuff. So, leave it to a Virgo to use a computer metaphor to try to describe the human experience as I'm trying to be more human and the rise of the computers. But here we are. So I do think it resonates, and I do think the computers are just like the reason that they're so advanced is because they're just kind of in some ways modeling what it's like to be human, how a brain works. So we do need this. We need to defragment. We need to delete stuff. We need to create space. It means throwing away stuff, donating stuff, selling stuff, clearing out your schedule a bit. If there's something you're doing that you can let go, it's like, and you go to do it and you just feel dread, you don't love it, get that off the calendar. What are you doing? Your life is short. Why? Why put that on the calendar? Why put yourself through that if you're not really happy? This is something that I think is one of my strengths. I've had a easy time doing that. I guess not always, but I had some jobs I really didn't like, and after a certain point, I'm just like, no, what am I doing? Why am I still here? This is not what I want to do. And I saw people around me also didn't want to do it. They're not happy. I saw where it goes. They've been there like 20 years in this job, still not happy. I'm like, so what am I doing? So I was like, okay, I'll take whatever I can get paid, and I'll just teach yoga because I want to teach yoga. I don't care if I get paid nothing. I'm happy because I'm doing something I love. And I talk about this in Mindful New Year too. Like, what does success really mean? It's like, are you successful because you made this much money, but you worked a job you didn't like and you gave up your free time but you got the money? Is that really worth it? And then, you get sick later on anyway, and then you got to spend your money on your health. It's kind of typical thing that happens. No bueno. So, my attitude since my early 20s, I guess, has been like, yeah, life is short. Look at your schedule. And if there's something you really don't want to be doing, try to get it off the schedule as soon as you can and replace it with something you do want to be doing. This is part of this, cleaning things up. In the eight limbs of yoga, it's saucha, cleanliness. So we think of cleanliness as like, cleaning your house, which is also part of it. Yeah, it feels better when the house is clean. But it's also like cleanliness of energy and like there's something you're doing on the schedule you don't like. You're gonna now be kind of dirtying up your energy, dirtying up your mind of like, I don't feel good. Now I'm grumpy, now I'm irritable. All these domino effects. Treat people worse, etc. Clear it off your calendar. Now you're doing stuff you love. Well, that's the key. I have another friend I know who kind of prefers to complain more. It's like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. It's like, why are you doing it? quit the, move, quit the job, stop doing the bad habit, stop hanging out with the person that's bringing you down. But sometimes people get kind of hooked on the complaining rather than the resolving. So that can happen too. So be aware of that. It's part of the cleanliness is cleaning up the mind, and it's part of tapas as well. The passion, the effort, the energy to actually do the change is not as easy and accessible to everybody. I think that's more of my Aries, strong Aries energy for me that I can just, okay, I'm just going to do it. Whatever, we'll figure it out later, which has its pros and cons. But if you don't have that, it might be good to be around somebody who does have that, like a friend who can kind of light the fire under you. Like, hey, what are you doing? Stop doing that thing you don't like. Make the change. It's good to have that support sometimes. So yeah, looking around your physical reality, your schedule, your mental reality, your emotional world, your relational world, and it's a good time to just clean things up as we go into the new year. Mars is retrograde, so the planet of action and doing is like going within, more being, less doing, more being present, more being observant, being curious. And that being is where the good stuff really happens. You want more money, you could do a million activities, you could work your ass off more and more and more. Doesn't mean you're going to make more money if you're also doing all of those actions with like this desperation or this resentment or this negative energy that people pick up on and they're like, oof, I don't want to be around that. So it's the being that really matters. It's how you're being when you do this stuff. And I know people have very successful businesses and what seems like a very stressful situation, but they just laugh about everything. They're like the most playful people you can imagine. It's like, what came first, the playful attitude or the very successful business and lifestyle and happiness? Or is it both? Or are they happy because they got successful? One of my friends I know very well is like, he's had that positive attitude the whole time. He had no money when I first met him. Now he's very successful, $1 million business. Uh, Same positive, happy, free attitude. What came first, the being or the doing? So I think that's a big thing. I'm always looking at, and when I feel there's this need, I need to do more. I'm not doing enough, or this anxiety. For me, it shows up as like overwhelm. Like there's just so much to do. What should I do? I don't know. It all feels urgent. That's not a good state of being. The being is overwhelmed. So say, okay, I'm not going to do anything until I change my state of being. And that's not always easy. Sometimes it's very quick. Sometimes it's hard. Cold shower can do it fast. A yoga class usually is the thing for me. After yoga class, I'm like, reset. Okay, new perspective. Or take a nap or go for a walk. It's going to vary every time, but that helps me. So anyway, a little bit of a random episode talking about lots of stuff. Hopefully it's helpful. Hopefully it's interesting to you. Resonates in some way, sharing. But yeah, it's the winter solstice, so it's a good time to take a little bit of a internal time on the 21st. Time for reflection, time for introspection, time in silence if you can, listening within even just a few minutes. You'll see what rises to the surface. So much there. You do it longer, it's just more stuff rises to the surface. And then at a certain point, you got to do something with it. Like, okay, how am I going to interpret this? What do I make this mean that I have this thing, this trauma resurfacing, or these song lyrics resurfacing, or this thought, or this fantasy, or whatever? The meaning that we give it is very important because we could actually give it just about any meaning we want. We're meaning making machines, and that meaning now is going to have a big impact on your feelings. So generally, the meaning I'm usually leaning towards is like, what can I learn from this? This is here for my growth. This is happening for me. Uh, there's some part of me that needed to repeat this pattern to learn this lesson. So what can I learn from it? Ideally, that's what I aim towards, that kind of perspective of things. Yeah, sometimes I get down and I had depression years ago and I can access that state. I know what it feels like to be in depression. And I know when I'm getting close to it, it's like, oh, red red flag. uh, hold on, slow down. We're getting close. Slow down. I need to reset. I need to do something for self-care here to address this. Not in the sense of like suppress it, but in the sense of like don't feed it, don't amplify the fears, the anxieties, or the bad story or whatever. So yeah, if you had a history like this, also maybe some negative state or a depressive state or something that is unhealthy for you, to have that just awareness, and it's sort of like a playful compassion. Like it's like, oh, nope, not gonna go there today. Not today, Satan. And I'm just gonna do anything else besides that. Go for a walk, get outside, take a shower. It just to kind of interrupt the pattern. And fortunately for me, that it's very much a weak pattern at this point. The neural pathway is a lot weakened from where it was when I was like 20, 18 to 20 in that range, and I was having these issues more so. And then, one of the things for me, I was like, I knew the environment was not helping, living in the cold, dark weather, which I know some people prefer it. Some people have situations where you can't get out of it. So don't hang on to that too much. But for me, the message was very loud of like, I gotta be by the sun, gotta be by the equator. And so I did. I moved to Austin and now I live in Mexico, and this helps a lot for me. But everyone's a little different. So this is just a little bit about my story, a little bit about me and what I'm going through, what I'm processing. Overall, I think it's a positive experience, a lot of important lessons coming up, and a lot of things I'm like, okay, got the lesson. Thank you, universe. I think I'm done with that one. Let's move on, please. What else we got? And in a very open, kind of playful way, and very curious way too, of like, this will be an interesting year because it's still a year to like work through emotional stuff with all the water stuff going on. But I think there's a way of expressing and going into emotions that can be very healthy and cathartic, like therapy. For me, it's my men's group. Music is very much that for me. Playing music, listening to music, not dancing. Suck at dancing, but but yeah, I have some fun with this, and I think for all of us, like we can find a way to dance with it, sing with it, play with this playful emotional energy that's coming through in the next year. But making space for it first, right now, this week, making space for it with the winter solstice. All right, so other stuff going on. So that's Saturday, the winter solstice, December 21st, the longest night. Time to go within, do some reflection, defragment the mind, and connect with what is really true in your heart. What's unresolved, what needs to be resolved, what state of being you want to cultivate, and seeing that it's all happening for you, for your growth. And the true self is that still quiet voice within, not the loud, anxious, worried, afraid voice. That's the ego. That's our identification with form. Thank you, ego. We love you. And you can sit this one out tomorrow for the solstice, or maybe sometime this week if you have a chance. And the next transit's on Sunday, December 22nd, Venus into Dhanishta. Venus, the planet of love, relationships, beauty, and Dhanishta, wealth. It's for 12 days. So this is a good time to celebrate what you love, celebrate music, listen to good music. Dhanishta is also a very musical nakshatra. So it's a great time to just listen to music you love, sing songs you love. If you're into Christmas carols around Christmas, great. If you just want to play songs you love, sing with people, this is great. So overall, very positive energy through the end of the year, and can bring more fun and energy into relationships, even though it's in Capricorn. So there is still like some important lessons about creating structures in relationships that work for you, boundaries in relationships with Venus and Capricorn. And if you need to reinforce some boundaries with family members, they can be tested around this time for your growth, for your learning. Monday, December 23rd, Christmas Eve. That's Mercury's in Jesta Nakshatra. Very transformational energy to end the year. So this last week of 2024 can be a time of great insight and realizations, great for resolving issues in communication, having transformational talks. This could be resolving stuff. This could be like just listening to inspiring stuff, audiobooks, podcasts, talking with friends and very inspiring conversations, sharing ideas, dreams. Great time for doing breath work, yoga practices, transformational work, kundalini yoga, things like this. So that's Mercury and Jesta on December 23rd for 12 days leading up to the end of the year. So if you want to know all the transits happening next year, there's 8 major dates. There's over 100 transits, notable transits. That's all laid out in Mindful New Year. Guide you through the past year, clearing stuff out, and then show you what's going on next year and how to work with it, how to plan for it. I give you this calendar I made this year. So this is like the 7th year I've actually offered it as a program. It's maybe, I don't know, the 15th year I've done this work myself, for myself anyway. So this year I made the calendar a little different and put like basically red, green, and yellow days, but based on significant transits. So like when the moon is exalted, that's a good day. That's a good energy, regardless of what your chart is, regardless of other stuff. That's a positive energy coming in. Now, that might not be a good day for you for other reasons. You always have free will, you have your own chart, you have other aspects, etc. But generally, the transit is good. So I show you how to work with it. And if you notice the unfavorable side coming out, you also have the favorable side to lean towards. This is how I like to work with astrology. It's like a potential energy. It's like, oh, it's going to rain. That could mean it's depressing and sad and you just wanted to stay inside. It could also mean let's go out and dance in the rain and have some fun and just like be a wild, free human being again and connect to nature. Right? It's just what you do with it. So the transits are like that. Yeah, sometimes it is more like rain. Sometimes it is more like sun. Sometimes it is more down. Sometimes it is more up. So you know what to work with, and you have that in Mindful New Year for the whole year. It's like basically getting the preview of all the podcasts I'm going to do for the next year. And as we go through the year, you have it in your calendar app. So you can see, okay, this date, that's the eclipse. Okay, no big decisions on that day, but it's a big portal, etc. Got this transit and what that means. It's all laid out in the calendar for you. So that's really cool. I'm really happy with that. I'm really proud of that. I think that's something I wanted to make for a long time. And I kind of broke through of like how I wanted it to be and the way I would use it. I will be using it all year. And I think it'll be very helpful to everyone else too who's using it. So that's mindfulnewyear.com. You can still sign up now at the early enrollment rate for a limited time. And if you want to do some yoga practices with me, I just today, before the winter solstice, opened the Quietmind Yoga membership again. So we're going to be starting weekly classes there for January, monthly workshops. If you want support in your yoga meditation practice, as far as I know, this is like the most personalized yoga membership out there and way cheaper than what it is basically. It's like, you want me to teach you live yoga classes every week? Well, it's in there. I've been teaching yoga now for like, I don't know, since 2011, 13 years. So I love it. It's the embodiment practice. It's really what got me out of depression and got me really deep on the spiritual path and then deeper into jyotish and Ayurveda and everything. So if you like this podcast, you'll like my yoga classes over there. It's open enrollment now, so you can get in today if you want. Quietmind.yoga is the website for that. And there's a weekly live class. There's 800 plus on-demand classes for all styles, all levels. If you want yoga for back pain, for the hips, for shoulders, whatever, it's in there. And there's going to be just more and more keep getting added as we go. It's been going now since 2020. So entering the 5th year, is that right? So yeah, it's just going to keep going and growing. And we've got people who've been there since day one who love it. And it's amazing and super grateful for that. So it's a whole other world of embodiment because the astrology, this is like the intellectual in a way. It's the spiritual, it's the intuition, it's understanding the big picture, the patterns. But then how do we bring it down into the physical body, the root chakra, the experience of this in the world? That's in the yoga practices and the breath work and the meditation, which goes hand in hand. So Quiet Mind Yoga, check that out. And then the last thing I'll share is the Vedic Astrology Mentorship is opening on January 11th. We already have an amazing group in this class. It's going to be super fun. If you want to become a certified Vedic astrologer, quietmindastrology.com/mentorship. You can join the waitlist right now. We will be opening enrollment soon, and the class will start on January 11th. 6-month container. Within that, hundreds of hours of videos, all about learning jyotish, how to read planet signs, houses, and nakshatras, give great readings. Lots of example readings in there for you to see me working with clients, to see how I think, see mentoring calls with past classes. That's been going now since 2021. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be the 5th year of that, I guess, going forward. So yeah, it's very fun, very cool, very deep, and better than ever. Like, it just keeps improving in the mentorship. So if you want to learn astrology in depth, and really you learn a ton about your chart and how to read others' charts through the process. So quietmindastrology.com/mentorship. Thank you for listening. I look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast.